Sue Moroney.
Chair, well, look, after that speech from that member, I think we need to put the record straight a little. We absolutely need to put the record straight, because it was under Labor that we had the lowest unemployment rates for a very, very long time in this country. It was under Labor. But, remember this, under a Labor government, we had the first or second lowest unemployment in the OECD. Under this government, that has slumped to about 8th or 9th place the last time I looked. It's probably down to about 12th place now in the OECD for unemployment numbers. Why is that important? What that tells us is that every single one of those OECD countries went through the global financial crisis. Not many of them were in the privileged position that New Zealand was in because of the surpluses that the Labor government saved up over 9 years. Over 9 years, every single year there was a surplus, and that meant that New Zealand was in a much better position than almost any other OECD country when it came to dealing with the global financial crisis and when it came to dealing with unemployment. And what have they done? What have they done? They have slumped in the OECD when it comes to the number and the proportion of unemployed in our society, and they celebrate that. They celebrate it. Melissa Lee, the Honourable Paula Bennett think they've done a fabulous job. Well, if they looked at the international community and they looked at what they were given on a plate from the Labor government, then they will know that they have failed. They have absolutely failed. And Jo Goodhue can yell and scream as much as she likes, but the facts speak for themselves. Go, Mrs Goodhue, and look at the OECD ratings. We were the first or second on the ratings under the Labor government, and we've now slumped. We've now slumped. And so that is the record of this government, and no one should be confused about that. But the other record of this government is that not only have they had a very poor track record in terms of actually bringing down the number of unemployed during the global financial crisis, they have miscalculated and made their policy decisions for the last 4 years on false figures. On false figures from the Treasury, because the Treasury figures, I think it is deliberate, Mr Little, I agree with that. They have confused the whole picture so that 20,000 children living in poverty were not being counted by this government. No wonder their policies are wrong. No wonder they haven't worked out that the way to address child poverty is actually to increase the financial resources of those families. That is the answer to it. Fiddling around with immunisation is not going to actually address the issue of the financial problems and the crises that those families find themselves in. And Jo Goodhue may yell and scream about it, but that's still not going to get 1 cent more into those families where they actually need to be able to provide food, provide decent shelter, provide the necessities of life for their children. And I think it's a disgrace, Mr Chair, when we have 285,000 children in poverty in New Zealand, and it's growing. Every time the Treasury revise their figures, it's growing, because this is the land of milk and honey. We are not one of those countries without resources. We are not one of those countries without the means to get by. We are a South Pacific country with everything going for it. Well, we did have everything going for it when we had a government that had a plan in place, a government that cared about addressing inequality, a government that brought in the Working for Families package that party called communism by stealth, but that brought the largest number of children out of poverty in recent times in this country that we've ever seen. And on this side of the House, we are deeply proud of that, because that is the practical way of actually addressing issues that matter to families, the real issues, not the trumped-up issues, not the trumped-up figures from Treasury, not the diversion that the government seems keen on, pointing fingers over this side of the House. They need to actually address the very real issues that their policies are creating for everyday New Zealanders every day of the week. And as for the assertion that they are somehow getting all this number of New Zealanders into work. They aren't.
Alfred Naro.
Mr Chair, it's always interesting to listen to Chardonnay Socialists talk about the whole aspect of poverty. The whole